The murder of William Pickering. One famously busy street is Church Street. Often always busy, the street was no different in the 1700s when our next tale takes place. On one such busy day, a puppeteer whose name is unknown was performing a show entitled Incredible Motion to a paying crowd. Unlike everyone else, however, a man named William Smith entered the crowd refusing to pay. This enraged the hard-working puppeteer. As the show continued, the drunken William began to heckle the puppeteer, pushing and pushing him until he pushed him too far. Suddenly, to the crowd's horror, he whipped out his sword and attempted a savage attack on William. But it was not William Smith whose blood was spilt on the cobbles in front of many men, women and children that day, but an innocent man by the name of William Pickering. The puppeteer was quickly caught and put on trial before the court consisting of many eyewitnesses from that fateful day. This, paired with the fact he was caught with the murder weapon in his hand, meant for a quick guilty verdict to be given, and the puppeteer paid for his crime with his execution at York Castle. However, it is said that the mad puppeteer returned to the marketplace, where he remains to this day, seen dressed head to toe in black, wielding his bloody sword. Should you see him, however, it is advised that you avoid him, due to the belief that if he sees you, the sight of his still contorted face will send you insane. The Ghost of Grape Lane. The busy market street is not the only street home to a sorry tale. Once, Whitby's ports were home to many whaling ships, and its shops were stocked with whale oil products sold across the country. One such product was hair oil that would make hair incredibly soft. This story begins with a young girl running an errand for her father. Her name was Mary, and she was known throughout the town for her beautiful, long golden locks that were the envy of many. It is said that Mary gained such luscious locks by brushing her hair 100 times every morning and night before applying a drop of Dr. Firth's patent hair oil. These famous locks were immediately recognized by the baker of Grape Lane as he welcomed her in. Her father had asked her to take a meal to the baker for heating, and knowing the girl, the baker entrusted her to place the item in the oven herself. As the baker continued his work, back turned, he soon became witness to a horrific scream. Turning, he found the girl's golden locks had fallen into the oven, and flames were rapidly climbing her oiled locks, singeing the ends as they did so. Working as fast as he could, the baker rushed to beat the flames from her as she stumbled back frantically and ran into the street. The smell of burnt hair filled the air, and passers-by rushed to her aid. But it was too late. The flames had spread too quickly, and the girl died from her injuries in the local infirmary. This left the smell of burned hair lingering in the street, a scent that often returns even today, sometimes accompanied with the ghost of Mary as she walks in front of people covered in flames slowly burning her skin. Bagdale Hall. From the marketplace to residential streets, hotels have flourished alongside the town's popularity. With each hotel comes new ghost stories. However, the oldest hotel in Whitby is by far the most infamous. The Tudor mansion, built in 1516, Bagdale Hall is no stranger to reports of poltergeist activity, including lights being turned on in empty rooms and footsteps wandering up and down empty staircases. The ghostly culprit responsible? The hall's former owner, Brown Bushell. The pirate is said to have lacked loyalty during the English Civil War, jumping sides to whichever suited him best at any given time. Such an act was seen as treason when word got back to the Royalists, and Bushell was arrested and beheaded for his crimes. Ever since, Bushell has made his presence known in the hall, casting shadows down the hallways and staircases amongst other things. Though, Bushell is said to be accompanied by other spirits inside the hall, who whisper to each other in empty corridors, and a child whose whimpering cries sound from empty rooms. One way to know Brown Bushell is around is when the feeling of dread and doom wash over you while you enjoy your stay in Bagdale Hall. The Grey Lady. Almost every town in England has a ghost that goes by the name the Grey Lady, and Whitby is no different. However, the Grey Lady of Whitby does not haunt a manor house or library, but a primary school. Descriptions of her differ from person to person. Some say she is just a grey mist, others claim to have seen a full-bodied apparition, but most report seeing a dark figure outlining a lady. However she is seen, there is a shared sense of dread and fear in those who encounter her. Commonly wringing her hands and angrily shaking her head, the Grey Lady is an unsettling sight to behold, especially for primary school students. One such student, Rob Lupine, told the news outlet The Spooky Isles of the fear and morbid fascination expressed by the students privy to the Grey Lady's haunting in the 1970s. Mainly haunting the assembly hall, her dark shadow would grace the walls. Her cries could be heard from the back. But it was the Grey Lady's hands that were reported to be her most defining feature. Leathery and covered in blisters, the most widely witnessed incident involving one of these hands was when she was clearly seen shaking the maypole stood at the back of the hall by almost half the school, according to Lupine. Rumour has it, she is still there to this day. The Oak Chest Bride. This famous tale has been told for generations and has been connected to many stately homes across the world, including one belonging to the North Yorkshire Moors. While the bride is often nameless in other variations of this story, here she has a name, and so it is possible that the tale in fact originates from the tragic death of Francis Lovell, said to have taken place at Skelton Castle. On the day Lovell married the love of her life, spirits were high. The party was in full swing with music, laughter, drinks, and party games, ensuring an enjoyable evening. What would be the final game of the night was hide and seek. As the bride, Lovell was suggested be the one sought by her groom and party guests. While the guests counted to 100, Lovell wandered amongst the many potential hiding places until she found the perfect one. An old oak chest in an unused room. Excitedly, Lovell climbed in and eagerly waited for her groom and guests. As her seekers explored the castle, they called for Francis, laughing as they did so. After a while, the thrill of the game died down and boredom set in. With this, the guests called for Lovell to come out, but to no avail. And so they kept calling, "You win," but to no answer. It was then that the guests, her parents and her groom became anxious. Where was she? Had she fallen? Was she injured in the grounds? Quickly, the guests conducted a thorough search, checking the castle, the grounds, stables, coaches, the dungeon, the cellar, and the priest holes in the walls and the attic. Everywhere was checked and rechecked. Had she run away? The stables were checked for missing horses, but to no avail. Upstairs in the old oak chest, Lovell could hear their calls, and unbeknownst to them, was calling back frantically. For she had tried to return to the groom and her guests, but after pushing the lid, realized to her horror that the chest had latched itself as the heavy lid shut and could only be opened from the outside. She was screaming and banging on the chest lid, but such sounds had not been heard by others over the music and drunken laughter that then became frantic searching and shouting. Her mysterious disappearance shook the town and left her heartbroken groom wondering what became of his beloved bride. Had she run off with another, or had she met a cruel fate? The truth was not uncovered until many years later, when the venue was refurbished and the old oak chest was opened to reveal the skeleton of Lovell inside, still wrapped in her wedding dress. The Haunting of Dr. John Reilly. When housing in Whitby was much sparser than today, only the very fortunate could acquire one in such a prime location. One such fortunate person was Dr. John Reilly, who was not only fortunate enough to own a house in Whitby, but one right next to the George Hotel and a stone's throw away from the train station. Such a home often garnered jealous stares from the passers-by as they marvelled at the house. Dr. Reilly naturally grew accustomed to people marvelling at his house from across the street, and maybe assumed all grim expressions were such jealous stares. However, when people began gathering outside his house in a panic, he'd had enough. Storming outside to confront them, Dr. Reilly was startled to see the onlookers were white with fear. When he asked what was wrong, he was soon informed that a ghost had been frequently appearing in his window that overlooked Brunswick Street, attracting nearly the whole town to the doctor's doorstep as news spread. What happened after the doctor became aware of the apparition differs in retellings of the story. Some say, in an attempt to remove the ghost, the doctor simply had the window in which the ghost appeared be removed, while others claim he left, leaving the house stood empty for years as people became too afraid to look at the house, let alone buy it, resulting in it being torn down. But one thing remains the same. No one knows what became of the ghost. Did it leave, along with the window, doctor or house? Or is it still there, overlooking Brunswick Street and its passers-by?